Good evening. Welcome along. Still watching Germany? Why? Well, they're beating England. So what are you doing? And I said watching Germany there because surely you can't be watching England. I mean, it's just like watching Leicester.
It's time! Strap yourself in, because we're set up, switched on, and ready to go.
You are watching and listening to Chris and Leicester Till I Die TV on YouTube and your favourite podcasts. Till I Die TV, your first choice for everything Leicester City. Tune in and join in now.
And now, here's your host.
Right, Chris.
All right there. Welcome along. How the devil are we all? Yes, it is Germany 1, England 0, or England 0, Germany 1, to be 100% correct, which means at the moment the table is Italy are first with 11 points, Hungary are second with 10, Germany are third with 9, and we've got 2. We've got 2 points. Because literally, it's one more than Leicester. Good evening, Owen. How the devil are you, sir?
How you doing? You okay?
Yeah, not so bad. Thank you very much. Well, I mean, normally when you have an international break, you think, great, forget the worries of the league at the moment, and I don't know whether have they been taking a leaf out of Brendan's tactics book.
I watched. I listened to the game the other night against Italy, and it left a lot to be desired, I think. And tonight, I think it's the same again. So it's a tough one now, and it's gonna be problematic for England, isn't it? Being relegated out of the top tier of the Nations League is going to make it hard for us to qualify for Euro. Well, not hard, but a little bit more difficult than we normally get.
Well, in fairness, just before we come on to Leicester, I actually like the Nations League because if we weren't playing Italy, Germany, Hungary, and in this, we'd probably be playing San Marino, Andorra, Luxembourg in meaningless friendlies. So I do get that, and if it makes it makes it sort of harder for us to qualify, good, because at the moment, again, if we don't get out of these qualifying groups that we're in, which are absolutely ridiculous, then we don't deserve to even have a national team. So if we're in a harder group, I mean, you're a young, you're a young lad. You won't remember sort of, I don't think who was manager, but we had to play Italy. Glenn Hoddle was manager, and we had to play Italy, and they gave blood. And I don't know whether we had to then go off and qualify on a playoff or whatever, but we were actually playing Italy in the same group. It made it exciting.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think international football has long been boring. I think it's fair to say when you mentioned those kind of names, San Marino, Andorra, and those kind of teams don't really test England. And then you look at the amount of goals Harry Kane has scored for England against those kind of countries, and it's like takes a little bit away from it. Whereas this is clearly tougher tests, and I think clearly after this World Cup, there's going to have to be a discussion around Gareth Southgate and the manager, because I think, as with everything, Chris, things come to end of a cycle, and
they certainly do.
Bar a miraculous tournament in Qatar, I think this might just be that.
It could, and I mean, it so reminds me, because I supported Gareth. I said, everybody's wanted him out. They don't like the way he plays, but he's got us to a World Cup semi. He got us to a Euros final. We're further than we've ever been before, if you like. Probably our second or third best ever manager. But now it's going wrong. But then I'm looking at Leicester, and last season, I stuck by Rodgers. I said, all these injuries, it's not his fault. Finishing 8th and getting to a European semi-final with the injuries he had, to me, was an absolutely amazing. What he did was amazing. Probably did better than Pep winning the league. But again, this season, it's all gone a little bit tits up, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's certainly one way to put it. I think, mate. It's been difficult. I think we can all sit here and agree it's been really difficult for Leicester this season, and it's even difficult to kind of put your finger on exactly why that is the case, and that's something that when I've been thinking about it is actually it's quite correlates quite well with all the games that Leicester lose. And in the whole time under Brendan Rodgers, I don't think that there's been too many where you can go, it was because of that one thing that happened. Yeah. And I think maybe, even in the Europa Conference League semi-final against Roma, yes, there was the key point about Ricardo marking Tammy Abraham. That should never have happened. But there was just something not right about Leicester on that night. We didn't see what we normally see from Leicester. And I think that was the same with a lot of the performances from last season, with the season before. Every time Leicester lose, it's really difficult to exactly put your finger on why that is the case. But either way, they got to find out exactly what it is, because if you look at the next 5 games coming up, and if Leicester is still in that, it's still struggling after that, then
I mean, I actually
we're going to have to start talking about it.
I know we are. Unfortunately, we are. Having said that, True Red that just popped up, then he's a Forest fan, and we can't banter each other because we're both as bad as each other at the moment. I actually did the England watch along against Italy. I actually did with the Forest fan. I said, come on, hands across the ocean, what have you. Israel and Palestine maybe can't get together, but Forest and Leicester can. And we'd agreed that we were not going to talk about Leicester. Forest was going to talk about England. The game was so boring that we just ended up talking about Leicester and Forest all game. But I mean, Brendan came in, and I mean, the finger does point at Brendan a lot because he's the manager, and you can say, I mean, there was the famous, for me, when I lost it, when we lost to, I think we lost to West Ham. He changed Vestergaard in the 93rd minute at a corner, but when he came in, this was how we were seen to be playing under 12. And he got exciting football back. He got Jamie Vardy into the team, and the ball was getting to him. And now it seems to have gone totally backwards. Yeah,
I mean, when I think, and it's when you look across Brendan's whole career, it's very clear to see that when he arrives at a football club, when he arrives with a new team, that you're going to get a real reaction. And clearly, speaking to people in and around the club, speaking to people in the women's setup as well, when they first joined up with Leicester City, he provided some really in-depth sort of presentations about how he wants the team to play. He provided these just that kind of, you can see the Jose Mourinho kind of style tactics cards he was handing around, and all those different kind of things. And clearly you get that initial reaction, but then it's difficult afterwards to see, where kind of Brendan goes from there on. And, this is the longest he's ever been at a football club. More than at Celtic, more than at Liverpool, more than at Swansea. And this is kind of uncharted waters for him. And he's got to find, this is probably the biggest test of his managerial career is finding a way out of this mire, finding a way out of this mess, and being able to coach the side, manage the club, the expectations, the fans, all at once, to pull this team that should be nowhere near the bottom of the table, off the bottom of the table. and back into the top half of the Premier League, because that is where Leicester City will be aiming to finish every single year. They want to be challenging the hierarchy of the Premier League. That they are the instructions set out by the club, and at the moment they are so far away from doing that.
I mean, I was behind him last season. Ant, who you've just seen there, good evening, Ant. He is Roger's biggest critic, so God knows what he's going to say in a minute. But I just can't. I just look at it and think, like you say, this is the team plus a couple of extras minus Wesley Fofana that won the FA Cup. This is the team that got to fifth twice. And all right, you take into play, barring a Chilwell's toenail and a VAR decision, we may not have won the FA Cup. And had Tottenham and Arsenal been like they are this season, we may not have got fifth. But the fact of the matter is, we did. And we know we're not a Man United, but we should be, with these players, in that top half. And you did say it was uncharted territory for Brendan. Maybe that's because of a reason. Liverpool fans all said to us, third season syndrome with Brendan, it'll go downhill.
Yeah, it's really difficult. It's really difficult because, as I said before, this is probably his biggest challenge as a manager to pull a side full of quality like this. And he was talking when I interviewed him after the Brighton game, and he was explaining that there wasn't enough quality in the side and things like that. And I said, look, this is the same team virtually, bar one or two, that won the FA Cup, as you say, won the Community Shield, finished fifth place twice back to back, and then got to the semi-final of a European competition for the first time ever and managed to finish eighth in a season that was totally decimated by injuries. So when you consider all of that, this side is clearly, I think we can all agree, without Wesley Fofana, the defense is a little bit weakened.
Yeah,
but it's still a top 10 side. It's still a top half Premier League side, and if they had managed to go out and strengthen this summer, maybe even a little bit more than that. It's so bizarre about where Leicester find themselves at this moment in time, and it's uncharted territory not only for Brendan but for the club as well. I mean, I know the club were there in the 2014-15 season, the greatest escape season, but there seems to be something a little bit different about that then, that the fans seem to be, on the whole, backing the manager at that point, and I don't really get that feeling now. No. I don't get the feeling that the fans believe that this can be turned around, and that's why all the odds are stacked against Brendan to do this now, and he will want to. After speaking to him for the amount of time that we've had, he will want to prove people wrong. And I mean, let's all hope that he does, Chris. Let's all hope that it's going to be a right challenge.
He has, he has got a lot to prove. He is going to earn his money. So I just say Germany have gone 2-0 up now. The first one was a penalty, apparently, but Havertz has just scored. Wouldn't you just know it? But you see him in press conferences, and he isn't the most animated manager on the pitch. The most exciting he gets is applauding the players. That's about as far as excitement goes for him. But and I don't know. I've noticed some of the questions now are starting to change, but I guess he's getting asked the same type of question, just in different ways a lot of the time by different journalists. But he just seemed disinterested. It's like, oh God, I don't really want to be here anymore.
Yeah, well, as you say, I was talking to someone else actually, and I think I speak to Brendan more than I speak to some of my mates, which kind of shows you how often the press conferences and things are. But he is, and I think I've pretty much listened to every single press conference that Brendan Rodgers has done whilst he's been at Leicester, either by sitting in the room or listening to it afterwards and editing it, whatever it is. And even when they were doing really well, never got too up, never got too down. And he's always kind of in that middle. And he talks about that being a really good space to be in, in professional football. And because it's when you win, you can get too high and then you become complacent. When you lose, you can feel like you're down, and then it's really difficult to get out of that. And he talks about that middle ground being the kind of perfect place to be, and he really does embody that. But things his press conferences seem to have changed. We sat down with him for an exclusive interview on Radio Leicester in the summer, and it was the first kind of interview that he'd done, and he talked a lot about a lot of different things, and I was really surprised how open he was, and it was perhaps the most open he'd been about lots of different things, and I think that's only kind of increased, and now he's being more open than ever. In every single press conference, it's more his details about the club. This is the thinking behind it, and I think that's great. For the fans and for people like us, Chris, who have to talk about Leicester, it's much better to know exactly what's going on, and Brendan outlays that really well. But it does feel different. The talking about players at times feels different. We were talking about it on the Football Forum tonight, and about how I asked him after the Manchester United game about why Charles Soyuncu wasn't played at centre half instead of Ndidi, and he said he's been nowhere near the level, not in training, not in matches. And I just thought, this feels strange. This feels different that Brendan's talking about his players in that kind of way. It's hard. It must be hard being a Premier League manager. And I heard Jordan on the show a little earlier on. He was talking about how he's the only person who speaks at the club. And he is the voice. He is the face of Leicester City. And the questions have to change, because I can't turn up to a presser and ask the same questions to Brendan week in, week out, because he's only going to give the same answer. So it's about trying to find a new way of asking about a similar subject, and that becomes.
You were talking about the Great Escape year, and I had a season ticket that particular season, and as you know, I live on the south coast. So it was like a 7.5-hour return journey every week to see us lose again, or every other week, sorry, to see us lose again. But the players, and as Ant alluded to then, the players, we weren't getting stuffed 6-2, 5-2, 4-2. It was 2-1s, 1-0s. The players, you felt like the players would go on that pitch and they were putting in a performance. These players, I don't feel that. I don't feel that they are. Now, whether that's down to Brendan or England have got one back. So that's that, obviously not playing like Leicester now. But yeah, I don't, like you said, there is a different feel about it. Those players would die for Nigel Pearson, and I just wonder whether Brendan might just be starting to lose the players a little bit, lose the dressing room.
I always feel that phrase is really interesting, like losing the dressing room, about how that can happen. And how it happens, and how players act when you see, and sometimes it's clear as day to see, isn't it? I mean, you only have to look at any of the sides managed by Jose Mourinho, and you see what it is like when he comes to the end of his tenure, and all of a sudden he looks about 15 to 20 years older than he actually is. And then he rocks up at his new club and he looks about 20 years old again. It's ridiculous. But when I talk to the players and I see the players coming out the dressing room, they all seem to have a similar feeling about what's going on. And all of that is based around the fact that they believe in Brendan and they believe in the game plan, and it's not too far away and it will come. All they've got to do is keep working. And I think they take a lot of accountability for the form that we've seen from Leicester. I personally don't think Brendan has lost the dressing room. I think he has the support of the players. But one thing I don't think, and we were talking about this on the Football Forum tonight, and Matt Piper was saying about how sometimes you can, and he had personal experience of this, sometimes you feel like, I'm backing the manager, I like what he's doing, but there's no trust in selection. And that's because there are some players that will know that if they're fit, they start. And Leicester only have maybe one or two, max three of those at the moment. You're talking about Johnny Evans and James Maddison, and at a push, maybe Danny Ward. And and I'm sure we'll end up talking about him at some point
Yes,
as well. But the incredible nature of it is that I'm not sure that Brendan knows what his best 11 is at the moment, or perhaps even the best formation. Is it a 3 at the back? Is it a 4 at the back? And sometimes that trust, parts of saying, can be lost in the manager when it comes to that, despite really agreeing with what he's doing.
Yeah, England have just pulled one back to Mason Mount, so it's now 2-2.
Come on, England.
Yeah. Southgate, do you want to come to Leicester?
All is forgiven.
Yeah. The thing is, though, it's like, how long has he been here with the same players, like we were saying, and yet we're saying maybe he doesn't know his best 11? And I do feel like Nigel, we know he wasn't particularly brilliant at press conferences. You got YouTube to prove that. But he would defend his players. And it was the phrase that Jordan used earlier about throwing players under the bus. I've seen tonight that he's come out and said maybe it was the wrong decision to play Ward. Well, what's Ward going to think, looking at that? He's saying to Soyuncu, he's not good enough. And then he's also saying he doesn't want to... He doesn't want to play players that don't want to be at the club. And yet Tielemans is starting every bloody game. Surely he's been there long enough to know what his best formation is, know what the players can do for him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And I totally hear that, Chris. I mean, as you say, he's been at Leicester, best part of 3.5 years now.
Yeah.
And that's a long time to be a manager of a football club, especially when he's spoken about how the refresh needed to be made because the cycle of the players had come to an end, and that you always need to refresh it because it had been the majority same group of the players for so long.
Yeah.
But I think clearly something's not working tactically. Which is the issue. That there's something not quite right in there, which is leaving Leicester wide open. And I don't know what it is, because they've been playing this 4 at the back formation with these inverted fullbacks, which theoretically shouldn't they shouldn't be overrun in midfield. It may leave you with 2 centre halves or with 2 centre halves and a fullback. But then you've also got this extra man in midfield and Wilfred Ndidi being in there, and clearly his form has fallen off a cliff. But theoretically, they shouldn't be getting overrun. So why is that? What's happening elsewhere? Because something is not right. And, regardless of whether you think it's a 3 at the back, a 4 at the back, whether Vardy should play, whether he shouldn't play, whether it should be Daka, Iheanacho, Barnes, doesn't matter. They're bottom of the table. They got 1 point from 7. They've conceded 22 goals in 7 games. Something is not right. The
worst ever by a Premier League team, unfortunately. Does he have his favourites? He seems to.
Well, I think certainly Johnny Evans, James Maddison, and Youri Tielemans are players that you can pretty much guarantee, and he's spoken glowingly about them, perhaps more than anyone, including Jamie Vardy as well. But when you look at Vardy's form at this moment in time, it's difficult, isn't it, to look at him and think about where that next goal is coming from. And he's been out of favour to Daka at points this season. But Johnny Evans is obviously that rock at the back of the defence. Youri Tielemans, he's spoken about as a captain, and spoken about him as like a coach on the pitch and the really, really important player for Leicester. And James Maddison is perhaps Leicester's best player. I think I would certainly say he was at the moment. And he talks about him being one of the best in the Premier League 15 times a season, however many it is. I think those 3, but I think they're warranted. What do you think?
I don't think Tielemans is, to be honest with you, because for me, Evans, we know, even if it's Soyuncu and Evans, he always played better when Evans was there, and a lot of people, I just want to say Andreas there just wants to say thank you to yourself. You've been a great help to hear directly from Brendan what's happening. So Andreas says thank you.
Thank you very much.
for me, a lot of people say, including Craig, my co-host on a lot of shows, that he's not an Evans fan and he's slow and he doesn't clear the ball. But I think he's got that experience. Rather than just hoof it, he takes the time to look and see what he can do with it. Maddison's been our best player. Yeah, he should be in the England squad, but that's another argument. Jamie Vardy is a difficult one because he's not getting into the game. The way that we're setting up, he's up there on his own, and he doesn't. And I'm just going to go back to a point that Ant made and what you said. He is almost a contradiction because we did so well when you had Vardy and Iheanacho together. It was forced upon him. Iheanacho ended up being the top scorer that season. Next season, he went back to one up front. It's obviously not working at the moment because they were not getting the ball to him. And as Ant says there, what do you make of Iheanacho's treatment? Because I'm surprised he's not knocking on the door saying, come on, play me or let me go.
He's such a weird player, isn't he? And such a confidence player as well. I mean, you just see what happens when he gets put into a side. Not last season before, and the FA Cup winning season when he finished the club's top goal scorer. And he just ran rampant, didn't he? Almost single-handedly got Leicester to the FA Cup final.
Yeah.
And then, struggles last season. Doesn't really seem to get anywhere near the team and is used a bit more as an impact player. Once everyone was kind of fit again and Leicester reverted back because they were playing a three at the back, weren't they, for a long period of time. And then once they revert back to a four at the back formation, it's difficult to fit Iheanacho into that because clearly he struggles to play as a number 9. He struggles to play as the kind of last man. He can't really move between centre backs. He can't preoccupy them as well as a player like Daka or Vardy could, because he doesn't have that really real scary pace that defenders have to really keep an eye on him, and he's more pick the ball up. And that's why I think he's thrived so much when he's played alongside Daka, because they play as a 2 and they play really well together. I think it's a waste at the moment of a real finisher and a real cutting edge. And if Leicester are going to start to really pick up points, I think you've got to be looking at Iheanacho, and I think you've got to be saying to him, because obviously he's a confidence player, you've got to be saying to him, right, you're starting the next 5 games. I need this many goals from you. I believe you can do it, and really just empower him to go out there and play. Because when he's on, wow, what a player. But when he's off,
and he doesn't get the credit, I don't think, because it's a great link up between the midfield and either Vardy or Daka. And, I think we know that Vardy and Daka are going to be, one of them or the other is going to be 60 minutes and one of them is going to be probably 30 minutes, But I just think he is totally and utterly wasted. But then it's often said stubborn and Brendan are 2 words that you often find in the same sentence. Sherry's asking here, do you think Kasper leaving has had an impact? Do you think he should have left? I've got my opinions on it, which you probably know if you saw the show earlier. What are your thoughts on Kasper leaving?
I think there was a lot of fans last season who were talking about Kasper and saying that it was time to move Kasper Schmeichel on from the football club. And they were talking about his distribution from goal kicks. And hey, let's all hold our hands up. His distribution from goal kicks wasn't the best at times, and sometimes he'd nail it and it was unbelievable, and then other times it was just straight out of play, shanked out the way. But one thing I think we've obviously seen this season is that people massively underestimated the effect that he had on the accountability of the players. And as the club captain, for what he won, what he did, the way he held himself, the way he acted, the power he held in that dressing room, I don't think you could have thrown anyone in there that wouldn't have respected Kasper for what he'd done. And for him to have left Leicester City, left a huge hole, not just in an incredible shot stopper, but a huge hole in the dressing room, and that is that is so hard to fill. And I don't think, and this is not his fault, but Danny Ward's not that character. He's not the same kind of character from what I've seen on the pitch that will hold players to account in the same way that Kasper Schmeichel did. And I think that is a huge miss for Leicester. And I don't know about you, Chris, but if you could reverse the clock a couple of months and keep Kasper Schmeichel at the football club, I certainly would be pushing that button.
I don't know, you see. I'm just saying England are now 3-2 up. Talk about the comebacks of comebacks. Wow. A penalty there. I'm just having a look where it puts... I'm not sure what group. I think, are we in Group L? We've kind of gone off the screen. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We're down anyway. But what a comeback! What a comeback! It's even more nice when it's against the Germans or the Argentinians, isn't it? But for me, always. At the start of the season, and we did a keep, loan, sell thing. I wanted him to go because yes, I was one of his critics last season. I don't think he commanded the box, and I don't think you can keep a player on just because. And I appreciate what you're saying. You know, he did have that commanding voice. I don't like captains as goalkeepers as captains anyway. I think you need an outfield player for that. And I did want Ward to step up, and then Iverson to step up. And all right, we brought Smithies in. God knows what he's like. Pukovic number 2, I'm guessing. But I mean, Ant says here, Kasper leaving was not the mistake. Replacing him with Ward was. I mean, to my mind, Iverson's had one good game this season. It was against the 4th tier team who had 4 shots and he saved a couple of penalties, which Ward quite often did in the cups as well. I mean, he did want a longer contract. And I just, looking at him last season, is it Ward's fault? We said earlier we're going to come on to that. I mean, would you be starting? And again, Brendan's come out today and said, well, I might have got it wrong about the keepers. And then my number 1's going to be. He seems to be throwing everybody under the bus because you never heard Pearson come out, very rarely, and have a go at the players. What must Ward be thinking?
Well, a penny for his thoughts, eh? I mean, he has waited so long for this opportunity, and it's finally presented itself, and it couldn't have gone any worse, could it, so far? No. For Danny Ward. I think I hear your point about the commanding of the box from Kasper, although I do think there were other players at fault for that kind of thing, for continuing to defend in that kind of way, and no one was really being aggressive to go and head the ball. And Kasper wasn't a big goalkeeper, so he can't dominate the box like other goalkeepers can. However, I think looking at some of the goals this season, I think Kasper saves some of them. I think he at least gets fingertips to some of them. I think back to Brentford on the opening day of the season when Josh Da Silva scored their second, and I thought. I looked at the replay and I just thought, I think Kasper saves it, or at least gets something like it. But Danny Ward didn't even move, and that's what you miss. That's what I think Leicester are missing this season. You're getting a keeper who's bigger, stronger in the air, certainly, but you're missing that shot stopper, that real top quality shot stopper, which was by far and away Kasper's best on-field attribute. And you just don't have that. You just don't have that now. And when you look at some of the goals, I think you can look at that. Although I think it's interesting that Brendan's talking about. I've not seen the story. I've not seen the quotes. But if that is true about him talking about his goalkeeper situation, I asked him about it earlier on in the season, and I said, does there come a point where you have to look at the goalkeeper situation and consider a change, taking Danny Ward out of that kind of firing line? And he said no, pretty much. And he said, I've always said that Danny Ward was always a number 1 goalkeeper at this football club. We had 2 number 1s last year, is what he said. And I thought, okay, fine. I mean, that's clearly settled it. I think Daniel Everson perhaps would have been the starting goalkeeper this season had he not made some horror errors in pre-season. I mean, that Notts County one where he came out, the one against OH Leuven, he would have stood much more of a chance to be starting in at least some of these games so far this season had he not made those mistakes, I think.
And do you think, I mean, it's not just, I mean, that's one example. It's 3-3 now, by the way. So the game I decided not to cover, I mean, it's 6 goals. But I just think, like, you know, he said about all, you know, certain players that he named should be, you know, looking for other clubs, and now they've not, so he's got to try and get them back. He seems to blame everybody but Brendan.
Yeah. I mean, I think clearly he is a man who really believes in what he does and really studies the game and really studies his own tactics clearly. And he often talks about getting there first one there in the morning, last one out, turning the lights off on the way out of Seagrave. And I do believe that, but there has to be a point where you look at what you're implementing. I think in any business, any walk of life, if something's not working, then you have to. I mean, if at Radio Leicester we were getting no listeners for the Football Forum, I think you have to look at what you're doing.
Yes,
and you have to reevaluate that, especially if things start dropping off, you have to do that. And he still clearly seems to think that the reason why Leicester are not performing is because the players are not doing what he's asking them to do, or the players aren't showing the quality that they need to play the system that he wants to play, or they're making silly mistakes. Some of the games this season, I don't think we can necessarily blame Brendan for, because there's only so much he can control from the sideline. If when Wilfred Ndidi gives that ball away against Spurs for the Bentancur goal, there's not a great deal that Brendan can do about that.
But when you look at the West Ham game last season, bringing Vestergaard on in the 92nd minute to defend, just as West Ham were about to take a corner, that you can blame him for.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Only bringing 2 substitutes on when we were allowed 5, and then complaining that the players were tired. Then saying, well, we've got one of the, the youngest squads, experienced squads, whatever. Well, we then get beaten 2-1 by a team that 10 of the squad that turned up against Southampton were in the squad that beat them 9-0. And to my mind, for me, Brendan as the manager, and it's a manager in whatever business, I've been a manager in sales, and I can't just go out and say that person isn't selling very well, he's got to go and get somebody else in. You can't do that. That's always at work. And like you said with the listeners, if he was as good a manager as people say he is, he should be able to get the best out of the players he's got. And stop trying to change them and play to their strengths rather than trying to get them to play to what he thinks they should be playing to.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like it's a bit of a perfect storm at the minute, isn't it? There's so many things that are going wrong at the same time. The club weren't able to shift those players this summer, so there was no money, no space in the squad to reinvest and to bring in players that were needed. Because even if Leicester had 100 million, 150 million, 200 million to spend, it doesn't matter. They had no space in the squad, so they can't spend it.
Yeah, exactly.
And they only got space in the squad after selling Fofana. Then you've got, injuries at the start of the season that kind of killed the tactical elements that Brendan had worked on in pre-season. You've got everything you've just talked about. You've got a manager who wanted a refresh, didn't get one, publicly called out the kind of and talked about the state of the financial state of the club, and has publicly thrown players under the bus. Yeah, but then you've also got players, speaking out, and it's a real difficult blend of stuff that's happening at Leicester at the moment, and it really has just created this perfect storm. It
is literally like you say. If anything could go wrong, it has gone wrong.
Yeah.
I asked Jordan this earlier, but I am interested in everybody's view on this, because in top I totally trust. Let me just say that, right? You know, what he has done for this club is absolutely amazing. And I trust him that he's doing the right thing to make sure we're not going to do a Derby County. Like you say, you know, we haven't got any space in the squad. So, you know, if we do what, you know, Barcelona do, which is buy players anyway, you're then going to end up, you know, dropping players but still paying their wages because we couldn't move them on. Or we take the biggest gamble ever in the fact that we could get into Europe, and then we end up being like Leeds United, you know, and we've only got to look down the road at Derby and their efforts to get in the Premier League. So I think he's done the right thing, but should and you'll know what sort of Jordan said to this, but I do wonder whether Brendan was hung out a little bit to dry, because it was great that Top came out and said what he said about the you know, the position we were in, but he left it until deadline day, the Man United game, by which time Brendan had to say, look, I can't buy anybody until, you know, I sell. And that's, I say, you might as well have put up a huge, you know, fire sale sign outside the stadium.
Yeah. Finances at football clubs are really weird. You know, we're not actually going to see these accounts for maybe another year and a half. You know, it's difficult to look at them as and when they're happening, and you can only really look back in hindsight and see them, which makes it really difficult to talk about them. My understanding was that the whole summer that this is sheerly down to squad size. You know, the club are creating a sustainable model, and that has been the directive from the hierarchy of the club, the board, on top, that the club needs to be sustainable to stop it imploding financially, like some of the clubs that you've just mentioned, like Derby and Leeds. And to do that, you know, you've got to be working within a means and a budget that cannot be overstepped. And this is the way that they're taking this, and how far they're taking this sustainable model, Chris, is that at the new training ground at Seagrave, they've got a vegetable patch that grow the vegetables that go in the players' dinners, and, you know, the herbs and stuff like that. Mate, it's absolutely ridiculous. There's kind of moss growing on the walls inside the training ground to, you know, really help with the airflow and create the inside. It's outrageous, the whole place. Yeah. They're even growing their own veg to put in the players' dinners, and that just shows you the kind of sustainable level that Leicester want to go down. It wants to be a self-sustaining football club. They got solar panels all over that dome. So it is only right that when you're looking at that sustainable model, that you look at the player wages, which are inflated too high. You've got players like Yannick Vestergaard on a reported £75,000 a week. Now, whoever signed that off, it's incredible. It's ridiculous, because especially when Brendan came out in his last press conference and talked about how Yannick Vestergaard knew he was coming in as a backup centre-back. So you're coming in as a backup centre-back, but you're paying him 75 grand a week.
Was that a panic buy, though, because of what had happened to Fofana?
Perhaps it was a panic buy, but I think Leicester were probably earmarking bringing in another centre-half already. But, you know, you've got squad size that was already too big, and that's why they moved on. You know, youngsters like Callum Wright, who left to go and play at Blackpool on a permanent deal. I think that surprised a few people. You had Casper leaving, with Smithies being brought in. It didn't help that Wesley Fofana was over the age of 21, or like he was like born 3 months too late, and 3 months too early, and was now counted as a squad player, not an under 21 player, and that's a problem they're going to have with Luke Thomas next year as well. You can't leave players out of the squad. They did that, and they got stung with that by Papi Mendy last season in the Premier League in the first half of the season. And all of a sudden, I mean, he only signed a 3-year contract a year or two ago. He's going to be what I think it would be fair to suggest 50 to 60, somewhere between 40 and 60 grand a week. I think it's probably fair for a 3-year deal for a player like that. So all of a sudden, you're looking at that much money every week being paid to a player who cannot play. It's incredible. It's incredible. So that they've made mistakes financially, and now they're trying to make sure and build the squad so that doesn't happen again. but that
And
takes time.
who do you think that was down to?
Well,
I don't think it was Top. Surely he wouldn't have been in, or would he have been in that sort of negotiation, like saying, "Well, you can pay this."
I doubt Kuntop would have been involved in sort of contract negotiations. I think that would more be with the recruitment side of things. Leicester, I mean, it could have been Lee Congerton before he left to go to Atalanta. Brendan Rodgers is obviously, it would be part of that, sort of player recruitment process, but I'm not sure whether he would be the man sat down with a pen and paper going, here's the contract for £75,000 a week, just sign here, Yannick. John Rudkin would have certainly been involved, I would expect.
I was going to say he never gets the credit when we seem to sign a great player, but he always gets the bullets when we buy, or something goes wrong. Yeah,
100%. It's like John. I've spoken to John a couple of times. He was Matt Piper's coach when he was younger in the academy squad. So sometimes when we're walking and into the same entrance at a stadium and them to have a bit of a chat, and he's a guy who, as you rightly say, has brought in and overseen the recruitment, and not just the recruitment. Clearly, as the director of football, he'll be doing much more than that. But he's overseen a incredibly successful period at Leicester City. Granted, there have been some shocking signings, but what club hasn't made bad signings over the last 10 years or so? And I think he gets so much undue criticism compared to the stuff that you don't see maybe him doing, that's actually helping and has helped the club an awful lot. But that doesn't excuse whoever signed off on the £75,000 for Yannick Vestergaard and similar money for similar players who are not playing in this Leicester side and not contributing at the moment.
And do you think that the club, they seem to be drifting away from the fans? I mean, I'm actually, funny enough, right now for the BBC on the website, on the Leicester City page. And obviously I see you pop up there all the time, but every Tuesday I write the Tuesday talking point. And I just wonder whether this was a club that was so close with its fans, and yet now, and I'm not saying that, and this was something that Jordan accused me of, and I'm not saying that they should be coming out and commenting on every single rumour all the time. But, us as fans were stood there saying, and I'll use this as an example, why the hell who signed off on getting a new head of recruitment that can't start another recruitment windows over? Who's been stupid enough to do that? But it wouldn't have mattered because we couldn't bring anybody in anyway. So if somebody, like I say, had just come out and maybe said that, the fans, I think, would be more understanding of the position we are in.
The saga with Martin Glover is so strange, and Rob Tanner covered that really well for the Athletic, and was able to get some really good sort of inside scoops on exactly what was happening. But the whole thing with him not being able to arrive until September the 1st was Southampton. It wasn't anyone at Leicester. But the reason they're so keen to get Martin Glover in is because of his creativity in the transfer market and his ability to work in markets that are very different to where the rest of the clubs are looking, and he's able to do that. And we've seen in his time at Southampton the kind of players that he's signed. And I was speaking to one of the Southampton reporters, and apparently he's really creative in the way that he negotiates deals and to get the best but not just the player, but the club as well, and to work it out that way and to make deals happen by hook or by crook in some way within the budget that he set, which is a lot smaller at Southampton than he would be able to be given at Leicester City. So, and he's really well connected throughout the game as well, which is maybe another reason why Leicester might want to bring someone like that in, because they're already struggling to get rid of their players.
I totally get as to why he was chosen, but because, nothing was said. And it wasn't just, I think it was the fact that you said earlier about the perfect storm. There was that, he can't join till the transfer windows closed. Like, what is the transfer head of recruitment? And then we've got this new set piece coach, and he's going to have his work cut out, isn't he? But he can't come in because we can't get him a visa, and it's all one thing on top of the other that you wouldn't normally question. Okay, so you can get a visa. Yeah, we know what it's like now because of Brexit and what have you. But putting everything together, and it's just been one hell of an awful summer.
It is. But one thing I will say on Martin Glover is that him whenever he would arrived would not have affected the plans for this summer. Was our understanding at Radio Leicester that actually the club work several transfer windows in front of where they are. So Martin Glover coming in now probably won't even be looking at. I mean, clearly he'll be looking at what the club have got planned for next summer, but the kind of targets that they would have, the list of players that they will want to go out and potentially see if they're available, the players they want to move on, will all be almost decided by this point already for maybe this summer and the January transfer window of what are we now, 2022, so probably 2024. They're looking into the summer of 2024 before they're looking. So I don't think that Martin Glover arriving at the club late would have changed a single thing in this transfer window.
I don't think it would, because obviously we didn't anyways. But I just think it's this sort of like, if only fans had known, then we couldn't. But we're still being linked with players in the upcoming January window. But unless things change, it's going to be no different then, is it?
Yeah, no, it won't be. It won't be unless Leicester can move on. Players like Yannick Vestergaard, players like Soyuncu, players like Dennis Pratt, players like Papi Mendy, if they can secure a permanent fee for Hamza Chowdhury, then excellent. And that perhaps is the job that Martin Glover's got to do now.
Yeah,
because they'll have a list of players that they want to go for, and it's going to be his job as the head of recruitment to be able to move on the players, to create the squad and create the funds in order to be able to bring new faces to the football club. But it's more difficult when you're bottom of the table, and it's more difficult when you're in a relegation fight, because why would a top tier player risk coming to a side that may be in a real chance of relegation this season? Not that Leicester are now, but if they're still in this kind of trouble come January time, then that's certainly when we have to start talking about that.
You mentioned him who doesn't seem to get mentioned an awful lot, and is a player that Leicester fans love, and that's Dennis Pratt. Now, you had two players that we were trying to get rid of, Dennis Pratt and Soumare. They were two players that I believe we were looking to move out. And both players actually said, we don't want to move, we want to stop and fight for our place. And maybe because of the form of indeed Soumare got his break, if you like, and I think has played reasonably well despite the results. I don't think he's done a bad job at all. But Dennis Pratt, what is it? He said he wants to stop, that he doesn't want to go. Tielemans is playing awful in a lot of games, not every game, in a lot of games. And Pratt comes on for, 20 minutes against Arsenal, which is like hanging him out to dry again. Why isn't Dennis Pratt getting the chance?
Well, I mean, he started against Chelsea, didn't he? Dennis Pratt. And I thought he played all right. And I think he's industrious and clearly doesn't have the quality of someone like James Maddison or something like that. But he's an international player. Yeah. He's played more than 15, 20 times for his country, I think, and certainly has quality. And I think we saw that in his first season, didn't we? In his first season and a bit, where I remember that goal he scored against Burnley from the edge of the box in the COVID games, and when he absolutely rifled that one. And he clearly has the quality. Now, Dennis and his family never actually really settled that well in Leicester, and he came from Italy, so they went back to Italy for the loan spell, but there couldn't be an agreement reached with the club he was at to move there permanently. And similarly with Monaco, Soumare was ready to go to Monaco, and they were really deep in negotiations, and it was Soumare who had a change of heart and said that he didn't want to leave his Leicester City story as it was just after one season, and he wanted to fight for his space. And I agree with you. I think Soumaré is a really good player.
Yes.
He plays really well in that kind of. He's a little bit of a 6, he's a little bit of an 8, but he transitions the ball so much quicker when in possession. But his biggest problem is out of possession. He does not run enough. He does not run hard enough. He does not follow his runners. He doesn't track his runners and misses out on the third man run. He doesn't see it happening around him, and he's just not quite got that pace, that speed for the Premier League where that's concerned. So he needs to improve on that. As for why Dennis Pratt isn't getting the look in at the moment, I'm not sure. But as you said earlier in the show, Chris, Brendan Rodgers is running out of options here. He's running out of options and running out of players to turn to. And at some point, all of these players are clearly going to get a go. But I wonder whether consistency maybe is the best way to move forward now.
He's sounding more and more like, when you've got managers like, say, the Norwich manager or the Watford manager while he's still there, that when they're fighting relegation, they're saying, I mean, Watford have got rid of the manager before us. I mean, that was never in doubt, I guess.
No.
But I mean, people are saying, well, he's got credit in the bank for winning us the FA Cup and winning us the Community Shield and getting us to 5th twice. Like I say, I obviously love him for that, but we were a Chilwell toenail through, not winning the FA Cup, and who knows what would have happened. But Rodgers' last 6 games, 1-0, drawn 1, lost 6, and we sat at 20th. Now, I just want to compare that to Claudio Ranieri, because he had, to my mind, probably a lot more credit in the bank because winning the Premier League was the better thing, I think, than winning the FA Cup. His last 7 games were 1-1, drawn 1, lost 5. And that includes Champions League teams. Sat in 17th place. And he was got rid of. Yeah. And yet with 3 places worse off, actually, he weren't even in the relegation zone when Ranieri went. When Rodgers is still there, like I say, in a worse position, and he hasn't gone. Is it the fact that, we can't afford to sack him?
Well, I think I remember there was a graph that did the line, and it was talked about how much managers were being paid, and I don't think it was entirely accurate. But Rodgers, is handsomely paid at Leicester. I think that much is clear.
He's our biggest ever paid manager, isn't he?
Yeah, and he will, I'm sure, be on more than some of his squad is. And that's rare for a club like Leicester to be in that kind of position. I think, and I sort of talked about this story on our boot room program last week, and I put a tweet out that people seem to jump on and have a lot of opinions about, even though it was just me doing my job. And that was that Brendan does have that kind of credit in the bank at the moment, and he does have the chance to turn this around. And that is because I think the achievements that he's had, but also because of the investment in him as a manager. Now, Leicester have rewarded Brendan with a big new contract just a couple of years ago for 5 years. He's one of the top paid managers in the Premier League now. They've invested and backed him in the transfer market, every single market really, bar the one that's just been, and that is for reasons that were a little out of Brendan's and the club's control. They couldn't get rid of those players, so they couldn't buy anyone in. But the summer before that, they had their biggest ever net spend. And that just tells you about the backing that he's had. So because of that investment in him as a manager, in building this squad over the last few years for him, for giving him this new contract, that they are going to give him another chance to turn this around. And as we well know, with the likes of Claude Puel last time out, Chris, the club like to give the managers, I mean, think how bad it really got under Claude Puel. I mean, they were some dark days there, but the club persisted until they couldn't go on any further. And I think that's what they're doing now. And if he can turn it around, it has to be in these next 5 games: Forest, Bournemouth, Palace, Leeds, Wolves. All games. If you want to finish where Leicester want to finish, you have to be taking points out of them before that Man City game. And I think they'll have a target in mind of the number of points that they want from those games, and quite right as well, because it needs to be a high target, because otherwise they'll very quickly find themselves in a relegation battle. But that all starts a week today against Nottingham Forest in the Premier League, and if that goes badly, then I mean that stadium.
Will it go if we lose against Forest?
I don't know.
You've made a very good point there. And this was my point, is the fact that what are we going to get from Forest, Bournemouth, Palace, Leeds, and Wolves? On paper, all winnable games, and then one after that is Man City. Can I see us winning those games under Brendan Rodgers? No. I mean, and I'm not taking into account the Spurs, the Arsenal, the Man United, or the Chelsea results, because they're going to be tough games, even when we were finishing 5th and what have you. But the other games, we should be winning. And if we can't, if we're getting stuffed by Brentford 5-2, Bournemouth haven't, since they lost 9-0, got rid of their manager, they've not lost. And I just think that was the time to do it, because if we get rid of him after the Wolves game, we could be literally 8, 9, 10 points adrift. Now, at least we're catchable.
Yeah, and looking at those games coming up, Palace, Forest, and Leeds, all home games. And you've got Bournemouth away from home that clearly you should be winning anyway, and Wolves away from home as well, which is always a tough game. But you've got some serious chances to take points there, real serious chances to take points, and they have to. They can't afford not to, because all of a sudden, then, as you say, you are, after those 5 games, 12 games into the season, 12 games into a 38-game season, and if you don't pick up points there, then when are the points going to come? And all of a sudden, you get into that November time. You've lost against Man City. You've got 2 wins all season. You're in the relegation zone. You're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 points adrift from safety. And you're going into that World Cup, coming off the back of it on Boxing Day. And you've got to be looking for points that early on. It could spell real trouble. So they have to, Chris, get those next 5 games right.
Well, yeah, you said it there. Man City was the next game up, which, like I say, even if we weren't where we are, you've got to say, well, we're probably not going to get much from that game, most of the time. And then you've got a really difficult one against Everton. And then you've got Newport County, and I'm sorry. I mean, we know what they've done us once before. And then, like you say, you've got the World Cup. And those 5 games are so important. And I don't think, you alluded to it earlier, if we were losing but putting up those battles, like I say, that we were putting up in the Great Escape year, you could kind of say, well, at least we're battling for it. But I am just so worried about those games that are coming up. And, when I look at Brighton, in that second half, it's almost like, well, yeah, Brendan's got a plan B, and he's also got a C and D and an E, but the different players seem to be playing different plans, and they didn't seem to know which plan they were playing. And I am worried. I'm not going to lie. I really am worried, But do you think Rodgers will still be here come the World Cup break? Is that the deciding point?
I think a lot depends on not only the results but the performances as well, because clearly the hierarchy and the board will want to be seeing signs that this is turning around, and not scrappy wins to just to keep the club and to keep the players and the manager and the fans just kind of like treading water. So I think they'll want to see performances as well. If it carries on like this, I don't know if they will be able to take it to the World Cup, because then you're talking another, what is it? You got a game at the end of October as well, and
West Ham,
so you're talking you're talking best part of 10 games before the World Cup. At that point in, I mean, you then
you cut adrift, aren't you?
You're then 15 to 17 games deep into a season, and then you're in real trouble.
And coming back from the World Cup, we've just got a small matter of Newcastle and Liverpool.
Well, yeah, exactly. Is that 6 points easy?
Yeah, like you say, I don't think he will last until. I did say after last season, and I backed him and said, yeah, he's had the injuries, he's done really well to get us what he got us last season. Because not so long ago, we'd have bitten your hand off for an 8th place in a European semi-final. And I said, let's give him to the World Cup. But I don't know if I can, to be honest with you. It is like Part 2, The Revenge, isn't it? If you quote a film phrase. I'm going to put you on the spot now. If he does go, whenever that may be, we don't know. So, there's only one person that knows that. And I say, whatever he does, I honestly think he would do it for the best interest of the club, 100%. Who would you have come in if he does get rid of Brendan?
Oh, what a question.
And I've seen some scary odds on some of the people that have been out there. So please don't say Alan Pardew. I mean, Antu was in earlier, and I spat my tea out when I was on a show with him, and he mentioned this about 6 weeks ago. He said Sean Dyche, and I like, you are joking me. But suddenly I'm watching him on doing a couple of interviews, actually thinking he's talking sense. But for you, I mean, for me it would be Thomas Frank, but whether we could afford him or not. But for who? For yourself?
Yeah, I think what you've got to look at is not just the manager, right? You've got to be looking at what the club want from a manager. And clearly he's not delivering on all of it at the moment, but when you look at Brendan as a gaffer, the things he brings and the things that he will pride himself on are things that Leicester City needs. So you're talking about attacking, free-flowing football that he will pride himself on, and we certainly saw that in the first 2 years of this time at Leicester. You're talking about a manager who develops youth and wants to punch above their weight every single season, and that's what Leicester need. They need to recruit well, but they need to be growing their own. They need to be wanting and trying to disrupt the hierarchy and wanting to punch above their weight and be that underdog that we all know that we can be. Yeah. And they need to do that whilst entertaining the fans. And Sean Dyche doesn't fit into those three categories for me. And I think, if you're in real dire trouble and you need him to come in and grit the defence up and put on a nasty display, make the grass really long at King Power Stadium so Man City can't pass the ball around and just go flying into tackles, fine, Sean Dyche is your man. But for what Leicester want and what Leicester need, I don't think he is. Thomas Frank is a good shout because he punches above his weight with Brentford, and they recruit really smartly, and a lot of the players are pretty young, and he's good working with them, and the football is good as well. And Brentford fans love him, so he must be doing something right there. Yeah. Other than that, and Graham Potter would have been a great choice, but obviously he's I
can't believe he's still in the betting, to be honest with you. Maybe they're thinking by the time Brendan goes, Potter might be struggling at Chelsea.
Well, yeah, maybe. But there's so many managers out there, but not too many of them fit the brief for Leicester City, and so it's difficult. And other than looking at the same old merry-go-round for the managers, as you say, Alan Pardew and Sean Dyche. I did have a quick look at the odds the other day just because I find it hilarious, and I found what I was looking for. Even Martin O'Neill's still getting linked with the Leicester manager's job, and he does every single time. But that's brilliant. But I don't know. I think if Leicester were going to go after one manager in particular, I think the only one that, and he's not even available because he's at a club at the moment, the only one in the Premier League certainly would be Thomas Frank, unless they go abroad and try and find a manager and a rough gem there.
Yes, yeah. The only one last one that was in the top three, I mean, Yeah, I think Thomas Frank ticks a lot of the boxes for us. Sean Dyche, he would be a stopgap, as in he would put grit back into the team. He would get the players playing, but he's not going to be the long-term manager that we're looking for. But one that everybody is mentioned, and I don't know whether he'd come to this club, but we certainly wouldn't have to pay a club off because he's not working at the moment, and that's Pochettino. Could you ever see him coming to Leicester? Unfinished business?
Yeah, perhaps in the Premier League, there may be some there. I think one of the key things is that, you know, he would want an awful lot of money, not only for himself, but he would want backing in the transfer market. And actually, you know, when you look at his Southampton team, they play good football, but didn't do too well. It wasn't until he went to Spurs and he had, you know, the real players at his disposal to put his style on it that he was able to really work with the team. Now, Leicester are a bit of a strange club in that argument because they kind of sit between Spurs and Southampton, don't they? So yes. he perhaps could do that, but it would be. I would be surprised. I would be surprised if they went for Pochettino because I just don't think he would fit in the mantra, and I think he would want too much that the club just can't provide at this moment in time.
Exactly. It would be nice to see, but yeah, we've all got a dream. Owen, thank you so much for coming on. As always, total pleasure having you on. Thank you for giving up. So this is your personal time. We'll talk again, I'm sure, sometime during the season. Fingers crossed it's not talking about how we're going to survive in the second tier.
No, thanks for having me, and I'm sure it won't be because I think Leicester will be absolutely fine. So.
I wish I had your confidence. I really do. You're never too good to go down. We've got to remember that.
True, very true.
You know, but anyway, no, mate, I really, really do appreciate you coming on and supporting the channel. Thank you very much. Take care and all the best, mate. And do you ever speak to Ian Stringer at all? Do you still speak to him? Yeah. I've done my best to him, and I hope he's all right. I know he's at TalkSport now, so do give him my best.
I will do. do.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, mate. All the best. Take care. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Oh, thanks to Owen there. What a nice chat. Well, we've got opinions from both sides. We've got opinions from the newspaper and opinions from the radio. I still can't believe he's there. I really, really can't. I'm going to be back tomorrow night at 9 o'clock with Talking of ex-player Steve Lynex. And also, of course, Brad with the Prediction League. And then we've got a bit of a quiz going on Wednesday. So join us for that. Thank you very much. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really is much appreciated. We're trying to get to 1,500. Don't think it will happen before the World Cup, but it would be beautiful and amazing if we did. And if you are already subscribed, please smash that likes button. And don't forget, we also have a radio station now as well, mixcloud.com/LTID radio. Mixcloud, like I said, all one word. So mixcloud.com/LTID radio. Or you can go on to our website, which is LeicesterTillIDie.com /radio. And my mind went then. Hello, somebody saying Rodgers for the England job. He's Northern Irish. Don't know whether they'd give it to him or not. It would get him off our back, wouldn't it? Definitely. Anyway, thanks very much, guys. Not all doom and gloom. This time next week it might be, though. We've got Forest coming up. And no, I'm not even going there. All the best. And thank you to Owen for coming on. Great guy. And thanks for giving up his personal time. I will see you tomorrow night at 9. In fact, tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. Check out Dugout Football Channel. We're going to be having a bit of fun. We're going to be rating the World Cup shirts. And apart from England's, I haven't seen any yet. So that's going to be interesting. Going to be a laugh. And we're going to disagree. That's the three things that are guaranteed. And then at 9 o'clock, we have got the prediction show with Steve Lynex, the ex-Fox. Take care, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for joining in. And if you're on the podcast, thank you very much for lending me your ears. Good night now. And tell you what, I'll press the right one.
That's all, folks. Thanks for watching Leicester Till I Die. This is Chris saying goodbye and see you next time.
This week's episode has come to an end. But the fun doesn't have to stop here. If you have any questions, suggestions or feedback, head over right now to Twitter and Facebook and like, share and get involved. Join us next time.
Thanks for watching. These videos are tremendous. You better like them too, or I'll be back.
Leicester Till I Die TV. They think it's all over. It is now.